take a look at the top stories of this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says at least 24 Russian drones entered Poland overnight, some using Belarusian airspace in what he calls a dangerous precedent for Europe. Poland confirms 19 violations, shoots down several drones and asks NATO to invoke Article 4 as damage is reported inside its territory. Israel's ambassador to the US says if Hamas leaders survived Tuesday's strike in Qatar, Israel will succeed next time, downplaying global criticism. He's later told Fox News the operation may draw backlash for now, but argues Israel is being changed for the better. UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed has arrived in Qatar in a show of solidarity after Israel's airstrikes on Hamas officials in Doha. Jordan's Crown Prince will be visiting later today, while Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is expected in Doha on Thursday. Iran and the UN nuclear watchdog announced a deal to resume inspections at facilities damaged by US and Israeli strikes in June, though details remain unclear. Tehran warns the agreement will collapse if US reimposes sanctions along with Europe, even as it faces pressure to account for enriched uranium stockpiles. Sebastian Lecornu has taken oath of office and has been sworn in as the next Prime Minister of France. French President Emmanuel Macron's 7th Prime Minister succeeded François Bayrou, who resigned after losing a confidence vote in the Parliament. President Donald Trump says his administration is negotiating to remove trade barriers with India and will speak to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the coming weeks. Trump strikes a more optimistic tone, expressing hope the two sides can finalize a deal after weeks of friction. French President Emmanuel Macron names 39-year-old Defense Minister Sebastian Lecornu as Prime Minister, signaling continuity with his pro-business agenda. The pick, a loyalist, could alienate left-wing allies and leave Macron reliant on far-right support in Parliament. Soldiers patrol Kathmandu as an indefinite curfew grips Nepal's capital after days of deadly anti-graft protests that forced Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli to resign. The unrest sparked by a social media ban left 19 dead when police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse demonstrators. Our top focus remains Poland, where its NATO allies are now on high alert after a wave of drones breached Polish airspace overnight. Multiple Russian drones violated Polish airspace in what authorities are calling the most serious incursion since the start of the Ukraine war. Poland's Interior Ministry has confirmed that 7 drones and debris from an unknown projectile were found, damaging a house and a car. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Donald Tusk has called it an act of aggression and warned of growing threats at the border. There are reactions from local residents coming in. Listen in.
Nie czułem się do końca bezpiecznie, jakby będąc tutaj i mając tą świadomość, że Rosja jakby troszeczkę infiltruje nasz kraj. Tutaj nie wiadomo, dlaczego te drony się pojawiły, ofiar, ale w przyszłości może się to powtórzyć i faktycznie może coś złego się wydarzyć. Trzeba to zbadać.
It's kind of worrying because, in Ukraine the situation started also kind of not the same, but like it was the same pattern with some learning sessions in the Belarus and Russia. As a person from Belarus, I really worry that my country can be involved in such things as war, like it's already kind of involved in the war in Ukraine. I would not want, of course, to this war to escalate into Europe scale.
Pytanie, jaka będzie odpowiedź i czy nasze służby coś robią, czy nie. Myślę, że szansa, że coś robią, jest równie duża jak szansa, że nic nie robią. Bardziej trzeba by się zastanowić, czy my jesteśmy bezpieczni, czy nie. Nie dlatego, że spadł dron, czy nie spadł, bo może właśnie te drony są po to, żebyśmy się czuli niebezpiecznie i czuli się.
On the other hand, Russia has charged the affairs claims the drones shot down over Poland originated from Ukraine. The Kremlin, however, refused to comment directly, saying the issue falls under the Defense Ministry's jurisdiction. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has condemned Russia's overnight drone incursion into Polish airspace, calling it absolutely reckless and not an isolated incident. Rutte praised NATO's swift response, saying it showed the alliance is fully capable of defending its territory and airspace. He stressed that NATO remains vigilant and will defend every inch of Allied ground. A full assessment of the violations is ongoing. Rutte also said the incident proves the urgent need to invest more in defense and confirmed that allies are determined to step up support for Ukraine amid rising threats to European security. Let's have a look at what the NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte had to say.
Last night, numerous drones from Russia violated Polish airspace. Our air defenses were activated and successfully ensured the defense of NATO territory, as they are designed to do. The North Atlantic Council met this morning and discussed the situation in light of Poland's request for consultations under Article 4 of the Washington Treaty. Allies expressed solidarity with Poland and denounced Russia's reckless behavior. A full assessment of the incident is ongoing. What is clear is that the violation last night is not an isolated incident. The Supreme Allied Commander will continue to actively manage our deterrence and defense posture along the entire eastern flank.
Ms. Alison Mutler, former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live on the broadcast. Ms. Mutler, I have to begin by understanding from you, what's your assessment of the situation right now? Poland has requested for Article 4 of NATO to be invoked. However, that does not mean that there'll be anything beyond a discussion at this point in time.
Yes, Article 4 is not as serious as Article 5. Article 5 means if a NATO member is attacked, the other NATO members respond with military action. Article 4, the lesser known Article 4 is it's not it's a lesser. It's not as ratcheted up as the Article 5, and it means that the members will all be informed and decide what action to take, but there's no premise of military action. At this point, the general message seems to be that Russia has escalated the war in Ukraine, and the fact that the drones went from Belarus onto Polish territory. I think there were 19 of them so far. No injuries have been reported. A house was damaged. Is seen as a way of testing NATO's resolve. Has a red line been crossed? Will NATO respond? I understand the Kremlin so far has not said anything. It's referred discussion to the Russian Defense Ministry. But what we've seen from past Russian behavior is definitely a testing of NATO's resolve. In the background, we have Donald Trump, the US president, has asked NATO, European members of NATO, to step up their own defense. So there's obviously a sense in Moscow, and not only in Moscow, that the US is not so willing to necessarily be involved in any incursion onto a NATO member's territory. We may be completely wrong. We haven't had any official reaction yet from the White House, but we are expecting it.
But Ms. Mutler, I have to understand from you, as far as the current information is concerned, is there somewhere a belief that this could possibly be Russia testing waters? Or what do you make of some of the commentary that's coming from Russia, where they're claiming that the drones were actually coming in from Ukraine?
Well, that the Russians say they're coming from Ukraine is because they don't want to address the issue. and it's obviously part of war is also to obfuscate the truth, to not tell the truth, to cover things up. So I wouldn't necessarily believe they were coming in from Ukraine. The assessment that we've seen from Western leaders is they did come from Belarus, which is Russia's ally. And the general sense it is to test NATO's resolve. Is Russia is escalating the war? Will NATO members respond to this, or will there be a ambivalent, ambiguous reaction?
Right. Ms. Butler, stay on with us because there are some reactions that are now pouring in following last night's violations of Polish airspace by multiple Russian drones. UK Defence Minister John Healey has described the incident as reckless, unprecedented and dangerous. Speaking at a defence meeting in London with counterparts from France, Germany, Italy and Poland, Healey strongly condemned the attacks, emphasising the urgent need for a united and firm response. This development has further escalated tensions across the region, highlighting the growing security challenges faced by NATO and its allies. Let's have a look at what the United Kingdom's Defence Minister had to say.
Poland's direct defensive military action last night is the first of its kind since Putin launched his illegal invasion in 2022. Defence Minister Khmelnytskyi has rightly headed home to Poland very early this morning to deal with this attack. Russia's actions are reckless, unprecedented and dangerous. We totally condemn these attacks. And we say to President Putin, your aggression only strengthens the unity between NATO nations. And we will discuss this morning what additional support we can provide to Poland.
Ms. Alison Mutler, still with us on the broadcast. Ms. Mutler, I have to understand from you now, a lot of support coming in for Ukraine. When the NATO allies say that we will provide all the support that is required at this point in time, what does that truly mean?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part. Where does that...
My question to you is, we've just heard the UK Defence Minister and he says that we will continue to extend support to Ukraine while also being on high alert as far as our own defences are concerned. I want to understand from you, when we talk about further support to Ukraine, what does that mean in current circumstances where the Polish airspace has been breached?
I would understand that the UK is trying to send a message as a key member of NATO that their support for Ukraine, which is strategic, which is military, which is intelligence, etc., will continue, and they will not be deterred by this incursion onto NATO territory in the form of the drones that violated Polish airspace. So it's a stern message, but obviously there's a lot of discussion going on between the NATO allies on the phones, behind closed doors, on WhatsApp messaging, whatever, to decide what response to give. But the UK has been very key in Ukraine, in defending Ukraine. So this is a message that Ukraine, we're standing by you. We will not drop you at this point. But we need to know what the White House says. That's the most important thing politically and militarily, and that's the most important thing, and defence-wise.
Absolutely. Ms. Butler, stay on with us as we shift our focus to more news, this time from France, which has sworn in a new Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, the fifth to take office in less than 2 years. He's a close ally of President Emmanuel Macron and former Defence Minister. Lecornu faces an immediate political storm as protests sweep the country. Nearly 200 people have been arrested so far in the early stages of the quote-unquote block everything demonstrations, which erupted alongside his appointment. Protesters, including students, medical workers and grassroots activists, accuse Macron's government of deepening inequality and ignoring public concerns. Many see Lecornu's appointment as more of the same, calling it a slap in the face and demanding urgent political change. Listen in.
On a souhaité manifester à cette manifestation parce qu'on est mécontente du système actuel. On veut qu'il y ait un partage des richesses pour tout le monde, parce que les plus riches, on en a marre qu'ils profitent. On veut la démission de M. Macron. On veut plus de salaire, on va dire. Et,
même avec des
C'est ça, on s'en sort pas. On travaille double, même triple des fois, et personne s'en sort.
Aujourd'hui, c'est le peuple qui descend et il n'y a pas trop d'élite ici. Et en fait, ce qu'on veut, nous, c'est se rassembler et ne plus qu'on soit divisé et qu'on se tape ou qu'on se regarde de travers. Alors que non, une société, une population, un pays, ça doit avancer ensemble et non chacun de son côté.
Aujourd'hui, les citoyens et les citoyennes, ils ont envie de participer, ils ont envie qu'on leur demande leur avis, ils ont envie que leur avis soit écouté. Et pour ça, il faut changer les règles du jeu. Les règles du jeu, c'est la Constitution. Et donc la Constitution, on doit la réécrire tous ensemble et tout ensemble.
Même si on comprend évidemment le fait qu'il n'y a pas eu une majorité absolue par la gauche à l'issue des élections, on sait très bien malgré tout que vu les voix qui ont été apportées, on ne peut pas ne pas écouter la gauche aujourd'hui. Et là, avoir une troisième nomination d'affilée encore d'un ministre proche d'Emmanuel Macron en tant que Premier ministre, c'est tout simplement plus acceptable à ce stade pour nous. On ne se sent absolument pas écouté, d'autant plus que là, ça s'est vraiment fait à peine dans les 6 heures suivant la remise de démission.
Alison Matla, former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us on the broadcast. Alison Matla, interesting developments taking place in France as well. This is the 5th Prime Minister to be sworn in, but the protests have already started. What do you make of his future in office?
Well, as you said, it's Macron's 5th Prime Minister in 18 months. There's a lot of political volatility, not to say instability in France, that the government is trying to push through very unpopular austerity measures. They're trying to trim a bloated budget. And whether we have one prime minister or another, the current one, the newly elected one, Sébastien Lecornu, is a close ally of Emmanuel Macron. The unions, the far right, the far left, anarchists are very angry about it. Probably ordinary people are, but they're not taking part in the protests. And obviously the interior minister, the police are concerned. France is known for violent protests, so they are quite well prepared. But the interior minister, the outgoing interior minister said that 80,000 police troops have been deployed. So I think we can expect more disruption, both socially on the streets in terms of protest, but also politically it will be difficult. On the other hand, behind closed doors, the politicians will be asking themselves, what is the alternative? Maybe it's best to let Macron take the political fallout from this before there are new elections. But a lot of the protesters, of what I've been reading, I'm not based in France, are basically blaming Macron, not his series of 5 prime ministers who've held office in the last 1.5 years.
Absolutely, Ms. Matla. Thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World with that perspective. Meanwhile, after massive unrest in Nepal following the Gen Z protests, Kathmandu's Tribhuvan International Airport has now been reopened. The airport was closed for 2 days amid the escalating violence in the country. All domestic and international flights, which had been suspended since September 9, are now cleared to operate. The Nepali army has been deployed, enforcing a nationwide curfew to restore order. Meanwhile, China has urged stability, calling Nepal a traditional friendly neighbor and advising its citizens in the country to remain cautious. The crisis marks one of Nepal's most serious political disruptions in recent years, with digital freedoms at the center of the unrest. Let's listen in to what the Chinese Foreign Ministry had to say.
尼泊尔是传统友好邻邦，希望尼泊尔各界能够妥善处理国内问题，尽快恢复社会秩序和国家稳定。中方已提醒在尼的中国公民注意安全。截止到目前，我们暂未收到有关中国公民伤亡的报告。尼泊尔发生游行示威后，外交部和驻尼泊尔使馆立即启动领事保护的应急机制，要求尼方切实保障中国公民和机构安全。使馆与当地的中国公民和机构保持了密切联系，指导他们做好安全防范和紧急避险，并为有需要的中国公民积极提供协助。
In other news, 3 people have been injured in Volochysk region after drones and missiles strike the area. 2 have suffered minor wounds, while 1 has been hit by shrapnel in the neck. Authorities have confirmed that there are no fatalities. Region governor says the attacks caused widespread damage to a textile factory. residential buildings, vehicles, and a gas station with blown out windows and destroyed infrastructure. Emergency services are assessing the damage and securing the sites. The regional government has urged citizens to stay on high alert and follow safety measures while investigations continue to determine the full extent of the damage. Let's listen in to what the governor of the area had to say.
Сьогоднішньої ночі атакували ракетами і дронами Волочиськ в Хмельницькому районі. Постраждало швейне виробництво, постраждали будинки, постраждали людські двері, вікна, автозаправочна станція. Найголовніше, що немає загиблих, але маємо 3 поранених, 3 постраждалих, 2 в легкій формі, в одного уламкове поранення шиї.
Mr. Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, joins us on the broadcast. Mr. Latham, I have to begin by understanding from you, Russia is now already embroiled in a larger controversy as far as the Polish airspace breach is concerned. Amidst that, reports continue to pour in from Ukraine of further Russian attacks. Why do you think Russia is not taking a pause?
Well, with respect to Poland, I don't think it's clear yet whether that was an accidental crossing of that airspace or whether that was deliberate, what we sometimes call in my line of work, salami slice tactics. You take a little slice, and if no response is forthcoming, you take another slice. And it could be testing and probing NATO's commitment. There's no reason in the world why Russia would suspend or reduce its strategic campaign against Ukraine on the eve of winter, going after the oil and energy infrastructure, for example, going after the agriculture sector, in attempt to both freeze and starve Ukraine into submission over this winter. This has been past practice, of course, over the last few winters as well. Pardon me. So there's really no reason why Russia doesn't feel under any pressure to suspend these operations. In fact, it's under a great deal of pressure to increase these operations in order to force Ukraine's hand, but also to make clear to Europe and the United States that whatever noises President Putin is making about peace and ceasefires, he's not going to accept either unless and until he gets what he wants on the ground.
All right, Ms. Latham, stay on with us on the broadcast as we shift our focus to other news. A U.S. federal judge has temporarily blocked President Donald Trump from removing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, dealing an early setback to the White House in an unprecedented legal battle over the central bank's independence. The preliminary ruling by Judge Jacob does not decide whether allegations that Cook committed mortgage fraud before taking office constitute legal cause for removal. Cook denies any wrongdoing and maintains she cannot be removed for actions taken before her confirmation in 2022. The case, likely to reach the Supreme Court, could have far-reaching implications for the Fed's autonomy in setting interest rates. The Fed is expected to announce a rate cut in its September 16-17 policy meeting. Trump and Fed Housing Director William Pulte have claimed that Cook provided inaccurate mortgage information, and the Justice Department has launched a criminal probe. Cook has been sued, saying the removal attempt is unlawful and politically motivated. Mr. Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, joins us. Mr. Latham, I have to understand from you, does this entire episode somewhere have a lasting impact on the institution's credibility, regardless of what the courts end up deciding?
Well, it could. I mean, there are two schools of thought with respect to independent agencies like the Fed, one of which is that it should be independent of political pressure, that the experts, as it were, should be in a position to set interest rates and things like that. And the other argument is that no, in fact, that's a product of a different time, an historical moment many, many decades ago. And what we really need is a democratically accountable set of institutions like the Fed that are, in fact, responsive to public pressure, not just expert pressures. And so that's an ongoing debate here. This particular episode muddies the waters a little bit in that the claims are not about big issues of principle. They're about whether this particular incumbent is guilty of a crime that was committed beforehand. And it's perhaps about the Trump administration overreaching, not out of principle because they don't like what the incumbent in that office has been doing and saying recently, especially with respect to interest rates. So there's a number of moving parts here, one of which has to do with this administration and this particular Fed governor. The other has to do with a bigger set of issues regarding to what extent should these so-called independent agencies in fact be independent, or should they be democratically accountable?
But at the same time, Mr. Latham, I also want to, of course, understand from you. The judge's preliminary ruling is hinged on the argument that the for-cause removal does not apply to actions taken before the governor's confirmation. But if this precedent is upheld, what does it mean for the vetting process of future nominees?
Well, it means that it'll have to be far more thorough if we're going to go back and look at pre-appointment conduct and whether there was anything that was shady, let alone illegal. Then there's going to have to be a far more thorough and long-term vetting process. And I don't see anything wrong with that. If somebody has proven that they are capable of serious misconduct, technically, possibly legally defrauding the banks, then that should be something that should be taken into consideration, perhaps held against them. I don't know by what logic simply judging them on the basis of what they've done since going into office is. If this is about character and about conduct and about competence over the long run, then we'll see if this goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court, what they have to say. But right now, I don't have any serious reservations about what this judge has found.
Right, absolutely. Ms. Latham, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World with that perspective. And that's all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more updates from around the world on the other side. Stay tuned.